If you've been involved in a car accident here in Arizona or really anywhere else in the country, and you might be fighting the case, or you might be in litigation, or you might be getting ready for trial, there's a concept in law that you need to know about. It's called comparative negligence, or it could be, if you're in a different state, it could be contributory negligence or partial contributory negligence. And that's what I'm going to talk about today in this video. If you're new to the channel, my name is Darren Woodfork. I'm an attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. My firm focuses on car accident cases, sealing old cases, and also restoring gun rights here. But today I'm going to talk about the personal injury aspect of fault. And I talked about Arizona in a previous video, and I talked about how libertarian Arizona is in the tradition of Barry Goldwater and John McCain and things like that, and how Arizona juries don't give a lot of money to injured victims here in the state, just because Arizona juries kind of think that, you take care of yourself and we're not going to pay you a bunch of money for your injuries. And so when it comes to fault, there's something called comparative negligence and contributory negligence and partial contributory negligence. The first and most severe concept is what's called full contributory negligence. And that's what you would think Arizona goes by, but we don't. And full contributory negligence is basically saying that if you're at fault for any reason in your accident, whether you weren't wearing your seatbelt or you're speeding or you're under the influence of alcohol, anything like that, if you're at fault at all, you cannot recover anything from the defendant who caused the accident. So basically, in a full contributory state, it says if you've done anything at all to contribute to the accident or the severity of your injuries, you can't recover from the defendant. Most states in America do not follow that system, but you would think that, based on what I said about Arizona, you would think Arizona does, but we don't. It is not a full contributory negligence state here in Arizona. And so therefore, basically, I guess the logical question was, what do we have here? And we have a relatively liberal system here, in that we have what's called comparative negligence. And what comparative negligence means is that you can recover, even if you're at fault for the accident in some way, you can recover from the defendant who caused the accident. And even if you're all the way up to 99% of the accident being your fault, but if it's 1% the defendant's fault, you can recover 1% essentially. And that's what it means. Essentially, whatever you would be entitled to gets reduced by how much you're at fault. A lot of times I see that when somebody's not wearing their seatbelt. That's the biggest thing when it comes to comparative fault. So basically, if you have a case that 100% of the liability for the defendant would be, let's say, $100,000, and that's what they have to pay if it was 100% their fault. But if my client was not wearing their seatbelt and the case is reduced by 50%, that means the client only gets $50,000 instead of $100,000. That's what comparative fault means. And so that's something you really need to think about too when you're getting ready to go to trial and what you think the jury might give you. If you go to trial and you win, even if you win, the verdict might be reduced by 90% because you're 90% at fault or 75% at fault, something like that. And so that's what comparative negligence is here in Arizona. That's what every personal injury lawyer in town should be aware of and should know about and should consult your clients about, because like I said, it's hard enough just to win the case in trial, let alone getting full value of the case. And that goes on both sides too, or that goes in two different aspects also. It's you could be partially at fault for causing the accident, or you could be at fault for how severe your injuries are. That's kind of, what I was talking about, the seatbelt. The seatbelt if you're wearing a seatbelt, your injury may not be as bad as they are if you weren't wearing your seatbelt. That's the most common fight we have here, at least I have in litigation anyway. But the other two things that come up every now and then is if the victim of the accident was under the influence and the defendant hit them. There's usually a fight about fault, saying that if you weren't under the influence, you wouldn't have been in a situation to get hit by the other person. And that's just the law, basically. And then finally, speeding. Speeding is kind of goes back to that seatbelt thing. It's like if you weren't speeding, then your injuries wouldn't be as bad as they are if you weren't speeding, basically. So that's how comparative negligence works here in Arizona. And then, like I said, in that contributory negligence that I started with, was saying you can't get anything, and then comparative negligence is on the other side of the spectrum. In the middle is what's called partial contributory negligence, and basically what that means is if you're more than 50% at fault for the accident, you can't recover anything. I think there's a handful of states in the country that go by that system. Essentially, and that's what it means. It's basically if the jury finds that you're 51% at fault for the accident, then you can't recover anything. You recover zero. That's what's called partial contributory negligence. And again, that's different than if in a full contributory negligence state, whereas if you're 1% at fault for the accident, you can't recover anything. And so this one, partial, says if you're over 51%, over half, you can recover. So anyways, so those are the three concepts regarding fault that you need to be aware of if you're about to go to trial on a personal injury case, because like I said, your verdict could be reduced by how much fault you are for your own accident. But even though even though the defendant caused it. So anyways, hope that helped. Again, if you're involved in a car accident or whatever, if you're involved in any personal injury, I should say, if you have any questions, please get in touch with my law firm. I'll have all my contact information down below. And also, at the end of this video, I will leave the video I referenced in the beginning of this, talking about Arizona and the libertarian bend and how juries don't give you any money here in Arizona. I'll leave that video after this. So thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.